The exhibit that we're going to look at today combines letters, documents, and artifacts with covers and other philatelic material. And it's to tell the story of our nation's very sad involvement with the enslaving of men, women, and children who were kidnapped and forcefully brought here from Africa, the conflicts between those who wanted to expand and those who wanted to abolish slavery, the rise of Abraham Lincoln, who would become the instrument of its end, and the bloody Civil War, which preserved the Union at great cost of lives while forcing an end to slavery and letting free black men honorably fight as soldiers, and ending with the last great casualty of that war, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. All of the materials in the exhibit that you're about to see and those on display here came into being from 1822 to 1866, which covers the period of Lincoln's mature life through the end of the year of official mourning. This is important because most topical exhibits usually use modern materials. And the challenge here was somewhat harder because you're only using materials that were contemporaneous to Lincoln. When I was young, I read a life of Lincoln condensed from Carl Sandburg's 6-volume biography. As a second-generation immigrant, it struck me, just like Barack Obama, it struck me how a man of such humble origin was able to become president of the United States. I began collecting Lincoln stamps. I started also collecting the story of his life and times in covers and documents. This is why my favorite covers and letter sheets, and many are shown here, are those of the 1860 presidential campaign. They show young Lincoln in manual labor, as a rail splitter, cutting logs to make fences, as a flat boatman, steering his barge boat down the Mississippi to New Orleans. His early occupations as farm boy, surveyor, shopkeeper, and postmaster of New Salem, Illinois, led me to suggest to the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee in 2003 that the issues for the bicentennial of his birth not just show some portraits, but show Lincoln the working man. Share with us the working Lincoln. And they did. Cheryl? Slave market. This slave market is taken from the masthead of William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Abolitionist. And it was later retitled, as this one is, The Liberator. What he shows here is a real market. A major turning point in Lincoln's life was, as a flatboatman and a youngster, he was in New Orleans and he saw men, women, and children chained in slavery, being sold at the slave market and treated as less than people. He promised himself that someday, if he had the opportunity, he would work against this evil. This is probably the most heart-rending item in the whole exhibit. This is a set of real cast iron slave shackles for a child. When little boys and girls were transferred from one owner to another or brought to the market for sale, they were shackled for transfer between owners. This is a bank note, and it's here because we're trying to show slaves at hard labor in the cotton fields and in the tobacco fields. In this case, the lady is carrying a basket bale of cotton, certainly as heavy as she is, and underfed at that. For this labor, they were often lashed by the whips of their cruel overseers. When there wasn't enough work for the slaves of a particular master, the slaves would be put out for hire to others who could use their labor. This document sets out a 1-year term of hire and requires that the master renting the slave must provide 1 suit of winter clothing and 2 suits of summer clothing. Something else that's out in the exhibit that I want to call your attention to, there is a slave metal tag, square tag. It's from Charleston, South Carolina in 1828, and it actually has an individual number on it. And this was that a hired slave had to wear this like an auto license tag, or they couldn't walk the streets of Charleston. This one must have been for a very trusted slave because it's imprinted servant, and he had to wear it just to walk in town. The Fugitive Slave Act forced free states to hold and return escaped slaves, many of whom had used the Underground Railroad to seek freedom, such as the one young woman captured here. Conflicts over the act and whether the Kansas and Nebraska territories would be admitted as free or as slave states led to armed conflict between pro and anti-slavery vigilantes. One group of those vigilantes, there were a number of slave rebellions in the U.S., the most well-known led by Nat Turner in 1831. In fact, there is a book, The Confessions of Nat Turner. The image we have here is John Brown. John Brown was one of the abolitionist leaders of the fighters in 1856 Kansas. In October 1859, he organized an attack on the Union Arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, now West Virginia, to seize weapons and gunpowder in an attempt to start a slave uprising. He failed. He was sentenced to hang. This picture of him is from the flyleaf of a Bible that he gave to a friend, and he's written at the bottom, "Farewell, God bless you, your friend John Brown." I think most of us may know the song, "John Brown's body lies a mouldering in his grave, but his soul goes marching on." And of course it was the soul of abolition that went marching on. This is an 1860 presidential campaign cover. It shows the 18-year-old young Lincoln, and if we look up here next to the 1857 stamp, we can see an image of young Lincoln on his barge flatboat. They were never quite that tall, and they were a good bit longer, and he's going down the Mississippi. Under Lincoln's portrait is Lincoln as a rail splitter. This one I rather like because it's not an axe. He's showing a maul, which is a kind of hammer, and a froe, which is a wedge to split the log. And that's a lot more accurate than the usual with an axe head. So.